wired for sound. And before we start, there's a few words I need to say. And if I was Dick Smolens, I would sing it, but I'm not Dick Smolens. So in the event of any catastrophe, head for that exit sign in the back, not for these exit signs here, and just keep moving. Did I do okay? Okay, all right. All right, why Sedona? For over 10 years, Rel and I have spent the month of March in Sedona, Arizona. And friends occasionally ask, you spend a whole month in the same place every March? Which is a polite way of saying they must have rocks in their heads. Well, we hope by the time you leave this evening, you will see that there's quite a lot of truth to that thought. Now, here's just a hint of what's to come. By the way, these older than dirt t-shirts are stained with red rock dust. And what makes it red? It's rust. Now, you chemists out there would call it iron oxide. Others would call it rust. As you drive into Sedona, this is the scene that greets you. It's quite spectacular. I love that scene, and it thrills me every time we do it. But before I give more of the details, let's see where this magical place is located. This is the southwestern segment of the U.S., and there's Los Angeles. And going to the slightly southeast, you come to Phoenix. And you go north from Phoenix exactly 100 miles, and you come to Sedona. When we go there, we fly to Phoenix, and we take a limousine or a shuttle. The services are offered to Sedona. Then we rent a car for the rest of the time, which is usually 4 weeks or a little more. And then we retrace our steps reluctantly coming back home again. With help from Google, we see that Sedona lies in a valley with rugged mountains to the north here, and you'll see shortly other mountains to the west and the east. This is the occupied portion, if you will, what's called West Sedona, and its elevation is about 4,500 feet, a little bit less than Denver. Everywhere you look is another view of mountains and cliffs and formations, all made of red rock up to a certain elevation. And to add to the interest, there's a river which is called Oak Creek. And I will trace it. You can't see it too well up here. It runs down through this canyon, through what serves as the center of Sedona, and then widens out and works its way down to the southwest. It's forest and mesas and every formation you could imagine. Right here in the middle, there is a mesa, on top of which is the Sedona Airport. And it's not served by United and U.S. Airways, I can tell you that. It's got a mile-long runway, which is just about big enough for a few corporate-sized jets, and mostly owned by the Hollywood set, I can tell you that. To To sum up what Sedona is all about is one word: hiking. Within 10 miles of downtown Sedona, there are over 100 trails, ranging from very easy to very difficult. This is a typical trailhead sign, and they always show you details of the hike ahead of you on this side and the overall trail map of the Sedona area on the left. This is a typical trail scene. Ahead of the hiker, as you may recognize from the back, I don't know, there is a marker called a cairn. It's nothing but a wire cage filled with rocks, red rocks, of course. And it's definitely a welcome sight if you think you're lost out on the trail to see one of those cairns. And that has happened to us. Also in this scene is a clump of prickly pear cactus. That's a welcome sight also, but not welcome to brush up against. Here we are with our daughter here, her son, our grandson, and our granddaughter, and I think you know that lady. We're taking a rest on a hike on convenient rocks that are along the trail. Here is a panoramic view. It's a view that I didn't even realize existed until we visited this past March and did a different trail. And here is that same scene in a brief video clip panning from east over around, looking north, over to the west, just to give you an idea of what the terrain is like. But it looks different everywhere you go. Here's the lady who gave the place its name, Sedona Schneble. She settled there with her husband in 1901, and they eked out a living by growing apples, of all things. They had an apple orchard, and there's a museum dedicated to that old apple orchard and their little business. I have a trivia question for you. Where else in the entire world can you find a place named Sedona? Well, I'll give you the answer. No place. It's a unique name and a unique place. First, we're going to focus on some of the countless red rock monuments. The most photographed of these is called Cathedral Rock, and that is Cathedral Rock, and you can see some people live pretty close to it. A favorite view of Cathedral Rock is from a fast-flowing part of Oak Creek. Rella and her son Doug are taking in the March beauty of this spot. See, there's no foliage. This is the way it looks in March. Cathedral Rock is so vast and varied, it looks different from every vantage point and in different light situations. To show Cathedral Rock in all its majesty, you really have to see it as an eagle might. You can see this was taken from a helicopter, and there's a rotor shadow flicking away there in the upper part of the screen. an amazing monument. Close to the center of Sedona, in the western part of town, is a red rock tower called Coffee Pot. It's at a trail junction marked by a cairn, so that's a typical kind of scene that you would find. I think you've already seen why it gets the name Coffee Pot. Here, a little arty shot where a dead tree is framing that photogenic monument. And I love this shot because it not only shows the beauty that's added by snow, which is very seldom seen, but it puts Coffee Pot in context with the formation to the west of it, culminated by this peak, which is called Thunder Mountain. It's the second highest point in the area. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, some formations are whimsical. Do you see Snoopy lying on his back with his nose and his toes pointing skyward? What else would you call this one but Bell Rock? Two of the climbers on this iconic monument are up here on this ledge. Those are our grandkids. And there's somebody here, and there's somebody down here and down here, but they went as high as you can get. And here they are coming down. The lowest one is our grandson Cody, and you have to watch as he works his way down and takes a leap to a little ledge below, and let's hope he makes it. Whoops. We'll never know. Erosion and time have created arches and bridges. This one is called Devil's Bridge, and it dares you to walk across. Some people did and do. We did not. Just around the bend, there's a mitten. Or is that a funny elf with his hands sticking up? And suddenly, an eerie monster glares down at you from the rock. Here, a 50-foot wine glass clings precariously to other rocks, and nearby, a huge lizard's head looms above these intrepid hikers. When we were there with our kids, they kept climbing up here and disappeared around the back of the lizard's head, and we didn't see them for weeks. That's a lie. My personal favorite of all the monuments is not written up much in the books about Sedona. This is what I call Our Lady of the Red Rock. You see her flowing robe here, and here you see Our Lady of the Red Rock with a lady friend. The blue sky is not doctored. Believe me, I could have made it bluer, but I didn't need to. That's the way it is essentially all the time. You can even see King Kong sitting near the top of Thunder Mountain. I highlighted him with an oval here, and you can see his ears here and his head and the rest of him. He has never come down since I've been watching him. Snow in March, as I said, is quite rare. This formation is called Chimney Rock, and it's quite a large vertical projection. And one year I was lucky enough to see it surrounded by red, white, and green. It didn't last long. The beauty is not all in the rock formations. Geometric lichen patterns decorate the trail. It's not too common to see circular patterns like this. The plant life is also eye-catching, like this sycamore tree, if you can call that a plant. Even the lowly cactus adds a bit of color in March. This giant has seen a few years, and our sun is up there just to show how big it is by contrast. Daisies bloom in this arid environment. Annual rainfall is under 20 inches a year. The reason we like March is that the temperatures are ideal for hiking. They run in the mid to upper 60s, occasionally creeping up into the 70s, whereas in May, June, July, August, they get up to roughly 10 degrees lower than Phoenix. And if Phoenix is 120, it can be 110 in Sedona. We have not been there at that time. To me, the most interesting desert plant is called the agave. It thrives with very little water, as do most desert plants, and it provides nutrition for people and animals, and it also provides a certain adult beverage called tequila. Like most desert plants, you do not want to fall into it. Every 10 to 30 years, agaves put up a huge flower stalk. It blooms, produces seed for the next generation, and then the entire plant just dies. It's called by some the century plant, which is a slight exaggeration. Prickly pear cactus can be as interesting as red rock monuments, of course on a much smaller scale. This one carries a romantic message for passers-by. That's probably 5 inches from where the heart starts here to the top. The combination of rock, lichen, trees, shadows, and sky paint a picture that few artists could capture. Other things you're apt to encounter on a hike are trail bikers like this, sometimes going pretty fast. And sometimes doing crazy things. I didn't take this one. I found it on the internet, so I'll never know what happened to him. Once in a while, you'll see horseback riders like these. They use the same trails as everybody else, sometimes leaving mementos along the way. Here's another group of horse people on one of my favorite trails. I call this photograph after the hike. These 6 pairs of shoes which is Rella and me and our family, are drying out after hosing them off. This was a day after a rare downpour when the red rock dust had turned to sticky, rusty mud. It took quite a while to get those cleaned up. It's not quite a big place for wildlife, but there is some. Here a chipmunk entertains us outside of our rental house. Sedona is a spiritual place for some people. The Chapel of the Holy Cross looms out of a red rock butte. It's a major tourist attraction, as you might imagine. And this is from the inside, where you can see spectacular views out that window. There are other churches, many other churches. This is really just a chapel. There's one called the Church of the Red Rock, which is congregational. There's a Solid Rock Church. There's a synagogue, a Buddhist temple, and many more places to worship. Now, if you've heard much about Sedona, you've probably heard of vortexes. Rella and I have never seen a vortex. And if we did see one, I doubt it would look like this. In fact, you're really only supposed to feel them. One psychic defines a vortex as a site where the energy of an area is concentrated. Because Sedona as a whole is known to be a spiritual power spot, a vortex site in Sedona is a place where one can feel Sedona's spiritual energy most strongly. There are supposed to be 4 main vortex spots around the Sedona area. These are 2 of them that we've already seen. This is Cathedral Rock and Bell Rock. There are 2 others that are not quite as photogenic as these 2. And I have to confess that I have yet to feel a spinning sensation in one of these places. But that's just me. This is the vortex that keeps me going. That's a typical outdoor scene with the desert plants. A few miles north of Sedona is a popular place called Slide Rock State Park, where Oak Creek rushes down over a series of rock ledges, and this was taken in March. The water originates in the mountains up at Flagstaff. This was taken by somebody else. It's not my picture. I found it on the internet, and it's a great fun place for young folks to slide down from one level to the next. Here's one starting out, and you'll see how it works in this next little video clip. Watch this young lady with her black and white suit. She's just starting down the slide. And there she goes. On down. And that must be pretty chilly because it's melting snow. Now, could we have some lights, please? Because this is a good place to break for something extremely important to this evening. Do you remember the old Prudential commercial, which said to own a piece of the rock? Well, Rella is about to pass around one container on this side, one on the other side, samples of Sedona red rock. And we hope everybody will take a piece as a little memory reminder of what you're seeing today. Now, besides hiking, a big attraction of Sedona is the many side trips to places within a day's drive. Rand McNally rates Oak Creek Canyon, that's the beautiful canyon down which the river of Oak Creek flows. They rate it as one of the top 5 scenic drives in all of the United States. This switchback section through Oak Creek Canyon is a rare sight after a snowstorm. At the top is an Indian market where our grandkids are browsing trays of jewelry. That's our grandson and granddaughter. These are mostly Navajo Indians who have their site carved out for them, and they are there every day of the week and weekends. Very popular place, selling trinkets and all kinds of little handmade items. Now, one year a snowstorm up there made it possible to create some other art forms. She's not the model for that. Less than an hour away brings you to these Pueblo remains called Montezuma Castle. That's Montezuma without an S. I don't know how it got the name, but that's what it's called. It was the home of early, what they called Sinagua Indians. Sinagua is Spanish for without water, so it was pretty dry living. But there was a source of water nearby. Yes, that's another place nearby. The letters here are not mounted on the side of the cliff, believe me. This was a postcard, a copy of a postcard. Indians called the Wupatkis, it's hard to pronounce, W-P-A-T-K-I, lived near Flagstaff, which is just a little over half an hour drive from Sedona, about 1,000 years ago. And they left a large settlement with fairly well preserved ruins. You can walk in and around and behind and back down again, and they're all over the place here. "50,000 years ago, an iron meteor hit the Earth east of what is Flagstaff now. It formed a crater 3/4 of a mile in diameter, and the impact is estimated at 10 million tons of TNT, which is maybe 1,000 times more powerful than what destroyed Hiroshima. This is a little under 600 feet deep from the rim to the bottom of the crater. And for contrast, this is the visitor center, which is quite sizable. A fun thing to do in the Red Rock area is a pink Jeep ride. These are pink Jeeps, and they provide thrills like this. Our kids did this on a couple of different occasions. We have yet to do it, maybe next time. One year, we rode a hot air balloon over terrain we had been hiking. And this was a balloon that lifted off just before our balloon did, so I was able to get a picture of it. And just before we were ready to touch down, I got this interesting shadow picture. This is the bottom of the balloon, the shadow on the landscape below, and that's the basket. And that basket holds about 12 people. And it was headed over here toward this truck, and they landed right next to that truck, where we were served a breakfast. And the breakfast featured mimosas. I think it was enjoyed by some. A couple of hours drive away, 2 hours is not too bad. You can get there and back and enjoy what you're there to see in one day. This is the petrified forest. And our group was resting on one of the hundreds of petrified logs in that area. An interesting feature of the petrified forest is some Indian signage, if you will. These are called petrographs, which are paintings on rocks by the Anasazi, the ancient Indians, not to be confused with petroglyphs, which are actually carved into the rocks. And this shows and it gives you an idea of the size of some of these trees. They were estimated to have lived about 225 million years ago, when they were living creatures, so to speak. Nearby to a petrified forest, almost part of it, is what's called the Painted Desert. It's almost as if there was a giant painter with his palette working on a canvas that stretched to the horizon with colors of pastels of every possible hue, including the foliage in the foreground. Of course, the ultimate side trip is the 2.5-hour drive, a little longer than the petrified forest, to Grand Canyon. We're at an overlook here with two good friends from Canada. We have known them for years. Every year that we've been to Sedona, they've been to Sedona in March, and we've enjoyed hiking with them and dining with them and having good camaraderie. This is a spot in the canyon they call Ooh-Ah Point, and it was especially breathtaking with snow on the ledges here. Snow is almost unheard of in the canyon itself because the rocks soak up the heat, and anything with water in it doesn't last. And of course, this is the muddy Colorado, a mile below the surface. This is a different view, perhaps a little more familiar to many people of Grand Canyon, with the typical monuments of this sort and a little bit of the river down here. Still a little snow. Now, I'm not letting you leave the magic of Sedona without climbing with me on my favorite hike. This is a balloon's eye view of a mesa which is called Doe Mountain. It's a huge mesa with a very flat top stretching from way back here to up here in the foreground. It's cliffs all the way around it. Only the north side here is not quite so vertical. This is another view of Doe Mountain taken from a satellite, which you can find on Google Earth on the internet. This is the road that you drive in on to a parking area right here. And from there you walk towards this face. And on that face there's a switchback trail that works its way back and forth over and finally bringing you up to this level place here, which is fairly devoid of vegetation, and that's mainly because of so many people walking up there. The rest of it is not so well trod on, so to speak. This is taken from the top of the mesa, and it shows part of the switchback trail. There's a lot more below this cliff top that you can't see, but it comes up here, wiggles back and forth here along the face of the side of the mountain, and finally way over here off the picture up to the top. Those that manage the 45-minute trek, which is an average climb, to the mesa top are rewarded with views of the red rock landscape in every direction, north, south, east, and west. It's the only place in all of Sedona that I know of that you can have unobstructed views in every direction and see a large number of the monuments. This is a view to the south, which shows things we've already seen, which is Bell Rock here, Cathedral Rock here, and another one called Courthouse Rock. And of course, the living area of Sedona below. Now, just to prove that she did it, here is my dear bride coming down the most difficult part of the whole trail, which is very near the top. And she's got a lot of help there, but she really didn't need it. She was able to work her way down. Of course, she had gotten up there not too long before this. And then back at the car, she gets her reward. And you can see Doe Mountain behind here, and that's the face that we climbed up back and forth. You get a kind of a small town feel in Sedona. They even have a St. Patrick's Day parade. And since that's my birthday, sometimes we tried to get there, not every time. One of my favorite events at the St. Patrick's Day parade are the Red Rockin' Grannies. And there's 4 of them here. I think that's all there are. And they strut their stuff down the street along with all the other people in the parade and the fire trucks and so forth. And they're not young. Pretty good looking ladies, actually. Behind them is a monument we haven't seen yet, and we'll see it better in the next picture. I'll mention the monument first and trace it. That's called Steamboat Rock, because the superstructure here kind of reminds you, or reminds some people anyway, of a passenger ship. This is what you might think of as downtown Sedona, but they call it uptown Sedona. And the street from this point all the way down beyond where you can see is lined with shops and tourists. And that's where most of the people who first come to Sedona end up buying their trinkets and whatever. both sides of the street, and restaurants, and it's something you need to do if you go, but we don't do it much anymore. However, there is a Chico's there, and enough said. Where did we stay? Well, I won't call this a typical rental. Some were better, some not so nice, but all I can say is the cost of a rental house with 2 or 3 bedrooms is considerably less than you would pay for a motel room, and you have all that space to rattle around in. And you can cook and have company. Here's another of our rental houses. We happen to stay this in two consecutive years, and that's Thunder Mountain right behind it. Great view of that and other monuments. All of these houses offered a chance to relax in the March sunshine and enjoy the scenery. And when the family was together, at dinner time, they always loved to clown around. This is our daughter, granddaughter, and grandson, and husband at that time of our granddaughter. This is a sort of a typical interior with a kitchenette, or it's fairly significant sized kitchen there and dining area, and then there's lots more to the house besides that. Now, I can tell you this. We had some pretty nice houses, but we never had anything quite like this. This house has a telescope on the roof, a pool down here, and my guess is that in these 4 garages below the house, there may be a Bentley, a Rolls, a Ferrari, who knows? I never did see what there was there, but the best thing is their view of Cathedral Rock. Now, before we get to questions, if you have any, I will try to answer one I expect is on your mind. 3 weeks ago, a fire broke out in Oak Creek Canyon near Slide Rock Park, where we saw that young girl sliding down. And this did quite a lot of damage. It burned over 20,000 acres. Now, the question I have, and I have not been able to get a satisfactory answer yet, is how much of the beauty along Oak Creek Canyon Road was affected by this fire. It was mostly to the west, which means when you're driving from Sedona up to Flagstaff, it was the left side of the road. So the right side of the road was largely unaffected, and there was a lot of buildings and tourist cabins and that sort of thing on the right side of the road, which were not burned, fortunately. But this shows you soon after the fire broke out. This is Slide Rock State Park, and a nighttime shot showing the flames in the background, and the other scenes are from different vantage points during the fire. So that's really enough of the Red Rock drama. It's time to say so long to Sedona. And Rella and I urgently ask that you keep what you just saw to yourselves. Sedona is growing too fast as it is. Currently, 3 million tourists visit every year. So that's the story. Maybe it explains why two reasonably sane adults can walk around and function with rocks in their heads. I especially want to give some thanks, great thanks, to the people who helped us during this presentation. That's Skip and Elaine McGrew, who had other things she had to go to, and tonight Cliff Smith is also helping us out. Helped to fit my microphone, which I never would have been able to do. Sorry? Mention, yeah. The two other things I'll just say in passing. I don't know if you all see the Smithsonian magazine. Very timely. Somebody said we must send a psychic message to them, but there's a cover article here called America's Best Small Towns. One of them is Sedona. I won't read it, but it's well worth reading. I did skim it before the program. And I didn't mention lots of other things that we have done and one can do in and around Sedona. There's other Indian ruins right nearby within a half-hour drive, which you can wander through. There's an out-of-Africa safari park with wild animals from Africa. Excellent place. There's a casino, of course. The Indians always have to have their casino, so you can go gamble if you're so inclined. In Flagstaff, there's the Lowell Observatory, which is very worthwhile seeing. There's a wonderful Hopi Indian Museum. And if you feel like skiing, which we never did, there's the 12,000-foot mountains called the San Francisco Peaks with skiing in Flagstaff. Nearer at hand is a town called Jerome, which is a very arty, crafty little place, a must-see place. And in Sedona, there's all kinds of arts and crafts, and an upscale marketplace called Tlaquepaque, which I guess is an Indian name. So I really just scratched the surface. Before you leave, I hope you'll have a look at some of the artifacts that we have placed up here on the stage. And there's a great aerial picture of all of Sedona, which projects as far as the white-capped mountains at Flagstaff. That's one of my favorite pictures of all of Sedona. So that is it, and I appreciate your coming.
Alan,
Yes, questions.
How did y'all get started going to Sedona, and how long have you been going?
About 10 years, a little more. We missed 1 year, not this past year, but the year before we missed. But we've been, for the last 10 or 12 years, we've been going.
When is the peak tourist season?
The tourist season?
The peak.
Peak tourist season. It starts in March, believe it or not. And I would say it runs through June. It gets a little too hot beyond that, but it's a favorite outing place for people who live in Phoenix, because if it's 100 degrees in Phoenix, you can count on it being only 90 in Sedona. And of course, the humidity is extremely low anyway, so it's tolerable. And
And lots of families go with small children at school break time.
if you couldn't hear this, she's saying that lots of families go at school break time, which also happens to be in March. So we've seen that situation with many families enjoying the area.
Alan, was there any problem with the elevation as far as getting yourself acclimatized to it?
Getting what?
Getting used to the elevation, was there any problem with that?
Adjusting to the elevation?
Yeah.
Not really. 4,500 feet is not all that difficult, at least for us.
It bothers some people, but
Some people do. It takes a couple of days of stretching your legs and getting out and puffing away for a while to get used to it. Any other questions? I do thank you all for coming.